Ethan Calloway had money, charm, and a smile that could turn boardrooms silent, but nothing had ever made him feel as nervous as watching her walk down the aisle. Callie Grace, the woman he met in a bookstore 2 years ago, wasn't rich, wasn't famous, but she had a laugh that melted every wall he'd ever built. Their love had grown quietly, away from tabloids, until Ethan surprised the world with a private ceremony in the Italian countryside. "Forever," he whispered when he placed the ring on her trembling finger. Callie smiled, but behind her eyes, there was something unreadable, something she'd carried even while saying yes. Ethan didn't notice it then. He only saw the future, but sometimes love blinds us to the one thing we should see most clearly. And the secret Callie held would not survive the honeymoon. Ethan had spared no expense. He flew them to a private island in the Seychelles where silence and waves greeted them, instead of paparazzi. The villa was carved into the cliffside, open to the sea, with every luxury money could buy. Callie walked barefoot everywhere, stunned by the beauty, overwhelmed by the attention. "You didn't have to do all this," she whispered, leaning into him. "You deserve more than this," Ethan replied. But every time he kissed her, he noticed how tightly she held her breath, like she was afraid of exhaling the truth. He chalked it up to nerves, to transition, to newness. But deep down, a quiet unease began to whisper beneath the waves. On the second night, Ethan reached for her suitcase to help unpack, but Callie rushed across the room and blocked him. "I'll handle it," she said quickly, too quickly. He raised an eyebrow, laughing it off, but her knuckles were whiter on the handle. "It's just personal things," she added, voice to sweet. Ethan nodded, but the gesture clung to him. What was she hiding in a bag meant for sun hats and swimsuits? That night, as she showered, he stared at the suitcase like it might whisper answers if he stared long enough. But he didn't open it, not yet. While organizing their shared closet, a small photo slipped from between Callie's books, one that didn't make sense. It was of her, years younger, holding a baby in her arms in a modest apartment, with no sign of the life she told him she'd lived. Ethan stared at it, heartbeat stuttering, questions crashing through his head. When he asked her about it gently, she froze. "That's old," she said. "A friend's baby. It doesn't matter." But she didn't meet his eyes, and she slipped the photo into her bag before he could say anything more. It did matter. He just didn't know how much yet. Ethan woke in the middle of the night to find Callie whispering on the balcony, her voice low and rushed. "You can't call me like this anymore," she said, back turned. Ethan didn't confront her, not yet. He waited until she returned to bed, curled up beside him, pretending nothing had happened. In the morning, she was extra affectionate, almost desperate. "You're everything I've ever wanted," she whispered. But Ethan's chest felt heavier than ever, and he began to wonder, had he married a woman he didn't truly know? During breakfast, overlooking the ocean, Ethan found himself staring at Callie's face as she laughed at something on her phone. He loved her. He wanted to trust her. But that one photo, the voice, the suitcase, it kept playing in his mind. "Is there something you haven't told me?" he asked gently. Callie stopped laughing. Her smile faded like fog in sunlight. "Why would you ask that?" she replied, but she didn't deny it, and that silence screamed louder than anything. Evening, as a storm rolled in from the sea, Callie stood by the window and began to cry. Ethan came to her side, wrapping his arms around her, feeling the tension she tried so hard to hide. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "Then don't hide from me," he replied, but she only shook her head, silent. The lightning flashed across her face, revealing more than just sadness. It was guilt. And Ethan finally said aloud what he feared most. "Who are you really, Callie?" Unable to sleep, Ethan accessed the private investigator he used in business just to ease his mind, he told himself. He gave them her name, her birth date, and asked for background verification. By dawn, he had an encrypted email with a file. He stared at the screen 4 minutes before opening it. When he did, the first line nearly knocked the air from his lungs. Callie Grace is not her legal name. There were documents, hospital records, a sealed family court file. Ethan closed the laptop and stared at the sea, heart pounding like a war drum, and he realized his wife had a life before him that she never wanted him to find. Later that day, a man called his private line no caller ID. "You don't know who she is," the voice said coldly, "and you married her." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" he demanded, but the caller hung up. When Ethan turned to Callie, she was already pale. "Did someone call you?" she asked too calmly. He nodded, heart racing. She sat down slowly, burying her face in her hands. "I should have told you everything before the wedding." And just like that, forever began to crack. That night, she sat on the edge of their bed and finally began to speak. "My real name is Marissa. I changed it years ago after something happened, something I ran from." Ethan didn't move. He didn't breathe. "It wasn't a lie to hurt you," she said. "It was a way to survive." She told him about a past filled with danger, a man who once controlled her, and a child she had to give up to protect. Ethan's world tilted, but he didn't walk away, not yet. Because love doesn't disappear with truth, it's tested by it. Marissa said his name like it burned on her tongue. Jared. Ethan stiffened, not recognizing it, but feeling the weight behind it. "He wasn't just someone I dated," she continued, voice trembling. He owned me financially, emotionally. He knew how to twist everything I loved until I had nothing left. Ethan clenched his fists, imagining her trapped, powerless. So I left, she said. I changed my name, started over, and never looked back until now. Ethan whispered, "Is that why someone called me? Is Jared still looking for you?" She nodded one hand. It felt like thunder inside his chest. She hesitated, then said the words that made Ethan sit down without meaning to. "I had a daughter." His vision blurred. What? Marissa wiped tears from her cheeks. "She's safe. I gave her up. I had no choice." Ethan's entire world slowed. "Does he know?" She shook her head. "And if he ever finds her, I don't know what he'd do." That was the moment Ethan knew. Their honeymoon wasn't a pause from the world. It was a war zone in disguise. Ethan didn't react the way she feared. He didn't yell, didn't throw accusations or ultimatums. Instead, he walked outside, called his most trusted security advisor, and began quietly building a wall no one would break. "She stays safe," he said. "Her daughter stays hidden." That night, he returned to bed and held Marissa like she might vanish. "We'll protect her," he whispered. "And I'll protect you too, even if you don't believe you deserve it." Marissa cried harder than she ever had, because Ethan wasn't a man who just said forever. He was the man who meant it. Ethan arranged a private flight to the U.S. without telling the press, without alerting anyone. Marissa returned to the town she swore she'd never see again. It all began. They drove past the hospital, the courthouse, the shelter where she had spent 3 nights alone. "Everything changed here," she whispered, "and it almost broke me." Ethan didn't speak. He simply took her hand. And for the first time, she walked those streets not as a victim, but as someone loved. They met with Mrs. Delaney, the social worker who had helped Marissa escape years ago. The older woman hugged her tightly, stunned to see her alive and even more stunned to see her standing next to a millionaire. "You were always brave," Mrs. Delaney said. "But now, you're safe too." She shared documents Ethan needed, sealed reports, legal files, information to protect the child. Marissa gripped the file, overwhelmed. "I never thought I'd see this with my own name on it again." Ethan looked at her. "You're not running anymore. You're reclaiming it." That evening, Ethan surprised her by checking them into a hotel under her real name, Marissa Blake. "I thought I'd feel sick," she said, staring at the ID card. "But I feel real." They had dinner in silence, not out of tension, but reflection. Every time Ethan looked at her, he saw not the woman he married, but something more. A survivor, a mother, a fighter. And that night, when they made love, it was the first time she gave herself fully as Marissa, not Callie. And it changed everything between them. They didn't expect Jared to appear so quickly, but monsters have a way of smelling fear. He found them outside the hotel. Slicksuit.com face, voice dripping poison. "Long time, Marissa," he said. Ethan stepped between them instantly. "Back off." Jared smirked. "Still letting others fight your battles." Marissa didn't flinch this time. "No," she said. "I'm finally fighting my own." And Ethan realized she wasn't just brave, she was becoming unstoppable. Later that night, Jared sent an email threatening to go public with her past unless she handed over something. "What does he want?" Ethan asked. Marissa shook her head. "He thinks I still have access to an account he once hid money in under my name." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Then we don't negotiate. We destroy him legally." But Marissa hesitated. "If he goes down, he might go after my daughter out of revenge." Ethan didn't blink. "Then we make sure he never gets the chance." That was the moment Ethan stopped being just a husband and became her shield. 2 days later, headlines exploded. "Millionaire's new bride has shocking criminal past." Photos, half-truths, and twisted timelines filled the web. Ethan was furious. This was him. His lawyers moved fast, but the story was already viral. Marissa locked herself in their room, devastated. "I ruined your name," she said through the door. "You didn't ruin anything," Ethan said from the other side. "You're not a stain on my reputation. You're the proof I have a soul." And when she opened the door, she saw in his eyes something she hadn't expected. Pride. After the storm passed, Ethan decided to speak. In a video shared only with their community, he looked directly into the camera and said, "You may know me as a millionaire, but I'm also a husband. And I married a woman who carries more courage than I ever could." Marissa sat beside him, hand in his. "My story isn't perfect," she said, "but maybe that's what makes it worth telling." If you believe in stories that show love can survive anything, subscribe now to our channel for more powerful journeys like this. And remember, sometimes, forever begins after the truth is revealed. Ethan's legal team filed an official lawsuit against Jared for blackmail, fraud, and identity abuse. The courtroom buzzed with press, whispers, and flashing lights. Some came for justice, others for scandal. Marissa sat between her lawyer and Ethan, heart pounding, but eyes steady. Jared appeared relaxed, confident in his smirk, believing his version of the truth could win. But Ethan had prepared every detail, every file, every timeline, every hidden asset Jared once buried under her name. "This isn't revenge," Ethan whispered. "It's protection." When Marissa took the stand, she wasn't trembling. She was ready. And for the first time, Jared looked worried. Marissa's testimony was raw, honest, and unpolished, exactly what the world needed to hear. She spoke about control, about fear, about the night she walked out with nothing but hope in her heart. I wasn't running from the law, she said. I was running for my life. The jury sat silent, eyes wide, jaws clenched. Even reporters wrote slower, as if realizing they were documenting more than a scandal. They were witnessing a survival story. Ethan squeezed her hand after she stepped down. I've never loved you more, he whispered, and Marissa knew that win or lose, she had already reclaimed herself. After the first day in court, clips of Marissa's speech flooded social media. Comments poured in, some cruel, but most supportive, inspired, emotional. Women wrote, she told my story. Others said, now I'm not ashamed. Ethan watched from their suite, stunned. You didn't just speak, he said. You gave people permission to speak to. Marissa looked overwhelmed. I didn't know anyone would listen, but they had. And their love story had just turned into something far bigger than either of them had imagined. A week later, the jury ruled in Marissa's favor. Jared was found guilty of financial fraud and coercion. The court awarded Marissa full legal clearance, expungement of all records linked to his crimes, and a protective order. When the gavel dropped, she didn't cheer, she wept. Ethan pulled her into his chest, whispering, it's over. But she knew better. It's not over, she replied. It's just beginning. And that night, they walked out of the courthouse not as victims or headlines, but as survivors who were finally free. Back at their estate, the quiet was unsettling at first. No reporters, no threats, no more hiding. Marissa wandered through the garden Ethan planted for her as a wedding gift, finally breathing it in. This place feels different now, she said. It feels mine too. Ethan stood behind her, watching her reclaim joy with every step. This house was built for love, he said, but now, it has a story behind it. She looked over her shoulder, smiling gently, and scars beautiful ones. One morning, Marissa received a letter in the mail, no return address. Inside was a photo of a young girl with brown eyes, just like hers. She's doing well, the note said, and one day, when she asks who her mother is, I'll tell her the truth. It was from the adoptive parents. Marissa fell to the floor, crying harder than she ever had. Ethan held her for hours. She's safe, he whispered, and she know who you are someday, when it's right. Marissa kissed his hand. That's all I ever prayed for. A women's advocacy foundation invited Marissa to speak at a global summit. You don't have to, Ethan said gently. I know, she replied, but maybe I was saved to help others find a way out too. On stage, she didn't read from paper. She just spoke from heart, from memory, from truth. By the end, the room stood in silence, tears falling. When she stepped off stage, Ethan was waiting. You're not just my wife, he said. You're someone the world needed and didn't know it. One night, they sat by the fireplace, wine in hand, and Ethan took her ring off gently. Let's renew our vows, he said. Not because we have to, but because we've survived. Things no one saw coming. Marissa's eyes shimmered. Then I vow this time not to hide from you. I vow to speak before I break, Ethan nodded. And I vow to never stop choosing you even when it's hard, even when it hurts. They kissed, ring between them, and it felt like a new beginning, one chosen in truth. Marissa started a podcast called Truth After Love, and Ethan was her first guest. They spoke about forgiveness, trauma, healing, and what it means to really know someone. Viewers from all over the world tuned in, sharing their stories in the comments. Ethan smiled at the end and said, if you're watching this and think love can't survive, secrets don't believe that lie. Love doesn't need perfection, it needs honesty. And if you're still with them on this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs it. On a calm morning, Marissa opened the front door and found a woman standing there, nervously holding a child's hand. She asked to meet you, the woman said softly. Ethan stepped up beside her, stunned. The girl looked up with wide brown eyes and said, are you the lady from the stories? Marissa fell to her knees, eyes filled with tears. I'm your mother, she whispered. And in that moment, nothing else mattered, not the past, not the fear, not the pain. Just a door finally opened, and a new chapter ready to begin. The girl hesitated for a moment, then slowly walked toward Marissa and wrapped her small arms around her. Marissa held her close, heart pounding, afraid to breathe too loudly and break the miracle. Ethan stood silently, watching two pieces of his wife's soul reunite before his eyes. Her name is Ivy, the woman said softly. She's always asked where she comes from. Marissa stroked the girl's hair, tears running freely. From strength, she whispered, from a love that never stopped waiting. Ivy looked up and smiled, and in that tiny smile, Marissa saw all the years she'd lost now returned. That evening, Ethan arranged a quiet dinner for just the three of them. No press, no staff, just a table beneath string lights in their garden. Ivy giggled as she fed a piece of bread to the koi fish below. Marissa watched her daughters wonder with awe, her hand resting on Ethan's. This is the most expensive meal I've ever had, Ethan said with a grin. Because it cost everything to get here. Marissa leaned in. And it's worth more than all your millions, he nodded. Funny, isn't it? I built empires, but this is what makes me rich. A few days later, Ivy sat beside Marissa and asked the question she'd been dreading. Why did you leave me? The words shattered her heart, but Marissa didn't flinch. I didn't leave because I didn't want you, she said gently. I left because I was scared someone would hurt us both. Ivy looked confused. You mean a bad guy? Marissa nodded, holding her close. But now we're safe, and I promise I'll never let you go again. Ivy thought for a moment, then whispered, okay. It was the smallest word, but to Marissa, it felt like forgiveness. Ethan knelt beside Ivy with a soft smile. You know, when I married your mom, I didn't know how lucky I really was, he said. But then I met you on. Now I feel even luckier. Ivy giggled. Do you love her a lot? Ethan nodded. More than anything. She paused. Do you love me too? He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Forever, Ivy. Even before I met you. Marissa watched from the doorway, tears in her eyes, because her daughter hadn't just gained a father, she had gained a protector. Marissa and Ethan launched a foundation called Second Light, aimed at helping women escape abuse, rebuild identities, and reclaim motherhood. It's not about saving people, Marissa told a crowd of donors. It's about giving them back what the world stole. Survivors sent letters, mothers reunited with children, stories bloomed from the cracks. Ethan used his wealth not for expansion but for redemption. This, he told a reporter, is the real legacy I want to leave. And when Marissa saw the nameplate on the building for Ivy, she couldn't stop crying. One morning, Marissa found an old photo in the attic, herself at 18, wide-eyed and alone, holding a train ticket and nothing else. She showed it to Ivy. That was me before I became your mom, she said. Were you scared? Ivy asked. Marissa nodded. But I walked anyway. Ivy tilted her head. Then you were brave. Marissa smiled through tears. Maybe, but the bravest thing I ever did was loving again. And Ivy whispered, like, you love Daddy. Yes, exactly like that. A year later, Ethan surprised Marissa with a vow renewal ceremony, this time in their own garden, with Ivy as the flower girl. There were no tabloids, no secrecy, just laughter, music, and love. Marissa wore a simple dress and walked barefoot through the aisle Ethan built himself. I know everything about you now, he said, slipping the new ring on her finger. And I'd still choose you, every single time, she smiled. And I choose you, not because I need saving but because I found home in you. And under the sunset sky forever felt real. One day, a message came from Jared's attorney, an appeal attempt, desperate and unfounded. Ethan read it in silence, then shredded it in front of the fireplace. He doesn't deserve another thought, Marissa said. Exactly, Ethan replied. The only story that matters now is the one we're writing. And so they never responded. They let the silence bury the past. Because healing wasn't about what they escaped, but about what they chose to hold on to, and they chose each other. Marissa published a book titled Truth After Forever, a memoir of survival, loss, motherhood, and love. It topped charts within days, not because it was sensational, but because it was true. In the dedication she wrote, to Ivy, who made me a mother, to Ethan, who made me brave, and to every woman who thought silence was her only option. You're not alone anymore. She received thousands of letters. Ethan smiled every time one arrived. They don't just see your past, he told her. They see their future through you. On a quiet evening, Ethan, Marissa, and Ivy sat around the fireplace, playing a card game Ivy made up herself. Outside, the stars blinked quietly, no cameras, no pressure, no threats. Can I tell you something? Ivy asked. Of course, Ethan and Marissa said in unison. She looked at them with the sincerity only a child can offer. This is what I think forever feels like. Marissa and Ethan looked at each other, eyes full, and they knew that after all the pain, all the secrets, all the storms, they had finally arrived. Together,